While Trump secures a massive trade deal with the EU, his deputies work to hammer out negotiations with China.
We don't want to decouple. We just need to de-risk with certain strategic industries.
I'm Daily Wire Executive Editor John Bickley with Georgia Howe. It's Wednesday, July 30th, and this is Morning Wire.
More details emerge about the mass shooting in New York, while officials lash out at the media after the brutal Cincinnati brawl.
Social media and journalism, and the role it plays in this incident. And yes, guys, that's you. That is you.
And is the U.S. facing a birthrate crisis? We look at all the numbers and the possible repercussions.
Thanks for waking up with Morning Wire. Stay tuned. We have the news you need to know.
Big tech companies don't just want your money, they want your data. Data brokers track your online activity and sell detailed profiles to marketers who target you with ads. You're the product being sold, but you can fight back. I use ExpressVPN to keep my browsing truly private, and I couldn't recommend it more. Data brokers, the middlemen collecting and selling all those digital footprints you leave online, easily track you through your device's unique IP address, which also reveals your location. Luckily, ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making it much harder for these brokers to monitor and monetize your private online activity. Your data stays yours. ExpressVPN certainly gives me peace of mind every time I log on, knowing all my personal information is safe from hackers and data brokers. ExpressVPN encrypts 100% of your network traffic, protecting your data from hackers on public Wi-Fi. It works across all your devices as well, your phone, tablet, laptop, and activates with just one tap. Simple protection everywhere you go. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/wire. That's expressvpn.com/wire, and you can get an extra 4 months free. expressvpn.com/wire today.
President Trump arrived home at the White House last night after a busy weekend negotiating trade and peace deals in the United Kingdom.
Here to share the highlights from the president's visit is Daily Wire White House correspondent Mary Margaret Olahan. Hey, Mary Margaret. So what's the latest from the White House?
Hey, guys. So yes, the president touched down at the White House last night around 7:30 p.m. after an eventful few days across the pond. Not only did he negotiate a massive trade deal agreement with the European Union, but he also achieved a crucial peace deal between Thailand and Cambodia. Assistant Press Secretary Taylor Rogers told me yesterday, and I'm quoting, "From peace deals to trade deals, this president has proven to be the ultimate negotiator and dealmaker-in-chief on behalf of the American people."
So let's dig more into the EU trade deal. Cabot provided some highlights, but what does it entail?
Yes, so the White House says that Americans will have unprecedented levels of market access to the European Union through this deal. Under the deal's terms, the United States and European Union reached a cooperation agreement on reciprocal, fair, and balanced trade, enabling American farmers, ranchers, fishermen, and manufacturers to increase their exports and expand their opportunities, as well as reduce the goods trade deficit with the European Union. The EU will also remove significant tariffs on American goods, including on American industrial goods exported to the EU, which should create huge opportunities for American-made and American-grown goods to compete in Europe. The hope is that this will drive growth across the American economy. And the European Union will purchase $750 billion worth of United States energy exports during the duration of Trump's time in office, and they'll invest $600 billion in the United States throughout the president's term, in addition to over $100 billion invested in the U.S. every year by the EU companies. Here's the EU Commission president explaining how the EU and the U.S. rebalance trade negotiations.
I think we hit exactly the point we wanted to find. Rebalance, but enable trade on both sides, which means good jobs on both sides of the Atlantic, means prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic, and that was important for us.
All right, so truly a massive deal here. What about this peace deal between Thailand and Cambodia? Where does that stand now?
Right. So as we had reported on Morning Wire, the president had warned both Thailand and Cambodia that he would not make any trade deals with either country if they continued warring with one another. He announced on Truth Social Monday that both countries had reached a ceasefire and peace. He wrote that they have, quote, saved thousands of lives and that he's instructed his trade team to restart negotiations on trade. As our friends at Breitbart reported, the president has brokered on average about one peace deal or ceasefire per month throughout his presidency so far.
Now, meanwhile, in Sweden, Chinese and American trade negotiators finished up a days-long meeting. They don't have any specific resolution to avoid a tariff surge at this point. What can you tell us on that front?
Yes, so the third round of meetings with China concluded without any solid trade agreement, but Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent still suggested that the trade advisor's time in Stockholm was still constructive.
We had great momentum going into the meeting thanks to the president's trade deals. I think that the Chinese were surprised by the magnitude of the Japan deal, by the magnitude and the terms of the European deal. So I think that they're never compliant, but I believe that they were in more of a mood for a wide-ranging discussion.
Well, clearly lots of developments happening on the international front. Big week for the president. Mary Margaret, thanks so much for reporting.
Thanks for having me.
If you run a small business, you know there's nothing small about it. Even the smallest decisions can feel massive. That's where Shopify comes in. Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names to brands that are just getting started. You can tackle all the important tasks all in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. Even marketing becomes a breeze thanks to their built-in tools for running social media and email campaigns, helping you find new customers and keep them coming back. Plus, Shopify's global selling tools have you covered internationally in over 150 countries, and their award-winning point of sale connects your online and offline sales all in the same place. With an impressive 99.99 uptime and the highest converting checkout experience on the planet, you'll never miss another sale. That's the Shopify advantage. Get all the big stuff for your small business right with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.com/morningwire. Head over to shopify.com/morningwire. Again, that's shopify.com/morningwire.
New York City suffered its deadliest mass shooting in a quarter of a century on Monday. A 27-year-old shooter stormed an office building in Midtown Manhattan, killing 4 before turning the gun on himself.
Daily Wire reporter Tim Pierce is here to talk about the shooting and the fallout. So, Tim, people are trying to make sense of what happened in New York on Monday. First, what happened?
Yeah, according to police, the shooter is a 27-year-old who played high school football in California and lived in Las Vegas. At around 6:30 p.m. on Monday, the gunman walked into the lobby of a skyscraper office building at 345 Park Avenue. He sprayed the room with bullets and hit a police officer, a security guard, and another man and woman. He then stepped on an elevator, ignoring a woman who was getting off, and took it up to the 33rd floor where he shot another woman and then himself. In total, 4 people were killed and 1 more person was injured. The shooter died from his own gunshot wound to the chest. Now, on top of it being the worst mass shooting in the city since 2000, this happened to be a really safe part of the city and a big tourist spot too. The Rockefeller Center and the Museum of Modern Art are just a few blocks away. Also worth noting, the New York Police Department honored the slain officer Diderol Islam on Monday night. Here's some video from Officer Islam's dignified transfer.
So the big question is always, why? Do we have any information about that?
Well, it appears to be connected to mental illness. The shooter was carrying what's been called a suicide note in his pocket that suggests he was targeting the NFL headquarters that are located in the same building. He never got there. The 33rd floor is occupied by a different company. But here's New York City Mayor Eric Adams talking about the shooter's note.
He alluded to having CTE from playing in the NFL. He never played in the NFL. And he alluded to the CTE being the reason for his illness. It appears as though he was going after the employees at the NFL.
CTE is a brain disease linked to repeated head trauma. It's been a big topic of discussion around professional contact sports, including the NFL. But from what we know, the shooter stopped playing football after high school. He does have a history of mental health problems. He was detained at least twice for mental health evaluations, once in 2022 and again in 2024.
Well, a terrible story. And just yesterday, we reported on a brawl in Cincinnati where at least 2 people were attacked. What are the latest developments there?
Well, Cincinnati Police Chief Teresa Thigi has come under some heat for a press conference she gave Monday on the attack. During the press conference, she announced that 5 people have been charged so far, but she also cast around a lot of blame on witnesses for not calling 911, on bars for possibly over-serving some of the people involved, and on journalists and social media influencers.
At times, social media and mainstream media and their commentaries are a misrepresentation of the circumstances surrounding any given event. Because what happens, that social media post and your coverage of it distorts the content of what actually happened. And it makes our job more difficult.
Now, a lot of people saw this as Thigi looking for scapegoats to avoid talking about the conduct of the videos, namely what appears to be a mostly black mob beating up several lighter-skinned people. Now, of those 5 charged, 2 have been arrested, 1 man and 1 woman. Both are charged with felony assault and aggravated riot. Worth noting, the man was actually in jail earlier this month on felony weapons and stolen property charges, but he was allowed back on the street after posting $400 for bail. Cincinnati's Democratic Mayor Aftab Purval weighed in again on the brawl after his Monday statement. He blamed the Trump administration, which announced it's looking at the case for any potential hate crimes.
There's no indication at this point that that race was a motivation in this violent act. There's a lot of speculation raging from very high levels of the national government, which is disappointing.
So it sounds like a lot of finger pointing from officials.
Yeah.
Tim, thanks for reporting.
Thanks for having me on.
New data shows the U.S. birth rate dropped to an all-time low last year, continuing a concerning decades-long trend.
Daily Wire senior editor Cabot Phillips is here with the details. Hey, Cabot. So this is something that you've been really watching closely for the last few years. We've done a couple of reports on this in the past. There's some new numbers here. They're concerning. Tell us about this.
Well, to put it simply, Americans are having less babies than ever before. This month, the CDC released their annual birth report, and another year of concerning data. It showed that in 2024, America's fertility rate fell to 1.59. That means the average woman in the U.S. now gives birth to well under 2 children on average over her lifetime. Not only is that the lowest mark on record, it represents a 19% decline in the last 20 years. For context, fewer babies were born in America in 2024 than in 1964, despite the fact that our population has nearly doubled since then. Now, some people might hear the story and say, well, the times are changing. What's the big deal? But the problem is a fertility rate of 1.59 puts America well below the replacement level, which is 2.1. In other words, a generation can only replace itself if the average woman has 2 or more babies. So if this current trend continues, it'll have an enormous impact, not just on our culture, but also our economy. As baby boomers continue to age out of the workforce, this trend means there will be fewer and fewer Americans to replace them.
So really a staggering dip, almost 20% in the last 20 years. So to the obvious question, what is driving this?
Well, first, there's certainly a social element at play. With women now comprising nearly 50% of the workforce, they're waiting longer than ever to get married and have kids. In 1980, the average first-time mother in America was 22. By 2011, they were 25, and now they are 27 and a half. There's also been a considerable increase in the number of Americans who are intentionally choosing not to have kids at all. One study found that 30% of adults without children are now child-free by choice, and younger Americans are less likely to want kids than any generation before them. A recent Harvard poll, for example, found that fewer than half of all adults under 30 say that having kids is important to them. But it's worth noting there are also significant biological factors at play as well.
Yeah, let's get into the biological factors. What are some of those?
Well, this could be a whole episode in itself, but the bottom line is people are simply less fertile than they used to be. Get this, the average male sperm count has fallen 62% since 1970. That is not a typo. Those findings have been replicated in a slew of different studies. Now, part of that decline can be attributed to lifestyle. Obesity and a sedentary lifestyle lowers fertility. And in the last 50 years, obesity rates have tripled worldwide. There's also the role of dangerous chemicals and pollutants in our water and food supply, namely PFAs or forever chemicals, which are used in just about everything from clothing to plastics and cooking utensils. Those chemicals build up in our bodies over time, and they've been proven over and over to disrupt hormone production and in turn hinder fertility.
So a lot of factors at play, some lifestyle, some external issues. So what's being done to combat this?
Well, the Trump administration has made clear that they view this decline as a crisis. In response, the president has taken executive action to encourage folks to now have more kids. First, he signed an executive order to reduce the cost of in vitro fertilization. He's also expanded the child tax credit and proposed a baby bonus that would offer $5,000 in cash to new parents after each birth. So they're trying to clearly incentivize folks to have kids. For his part, Vice President J.D. Vance has been maybe the most outspoken about increasing birth rates, which he calls a civilizational crisis and existential threat to America. Here he is, for example, at the March for Life earlier this year.
Let me say very simply, I want more babies in the United States of America. And it is the task of our government to make it easier for young moms and dads to afford to have kids, to bring them into the world, and to welcome them as the blessings that we know they are.
And then elsewhere in the White House, RFK Jr. has also vowed to address the root causes of this crisis. He says he's going to work on removing dangerous chemicals from our food supply and also educating Americans about the effects that processed foods can have on fertility.
Like you said, I don't think it's an exaggeration to call this a true crisis that we're facing here. Kappa, thanks so much for reporting.
Absolutely.
Another story we're tracking. Officials in Hawaii urged residents to evacuate the coastal areas Tuesday evening after an 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Russia. Alaska's Aleutian Islands also received tsunami warnings, while the entire west coast of the U.S. was under tsunami advisories. Look for updates on this developing story on dailywire.com.
Thanks for waking up with us. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We'll be back later this evening with more news you need to know.